Imagine waking up to chaos. The night sky torn apart by explosions. In the peaceful town of Liberty Falls, a sudden airstrike leaves devastation. But something miraculous is about to unfold. Matt Harper, a heroic firefighter, and his daughter Hannah desperately search for their lost dog, Buddy. Against all odds, Buddy is discovered trapped beneath a collapsed library. But what this brave dog uncovers next will shock everyone. What secret lies hidden under the rubble? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe for more heart-pounding stories. Liberty Falls, Ohio, lay tucked beneath a quilt of winter fog that clung low to its rooftops, the air still and sharp like a held breath. It was early January, the kind of night where snowflakes hesitated in the air before melting on the old iron railings that line Main Street. The town had always been quiet, a place of porch swings, worn-out hymnals, and coffee sipped slowly on wooden steps. But that silence would not survive the night. Matt Harper had just turned out the lights in their small two-story home on Birch Lane. 42, broad-shouldered and sun-worn, Matt carried the kind of gravity only men who'd seen too many flames could carry. He had served 20 years as a firefighter in Cleveland before a warehouse collapse fractured his spine and nearly took his legs. Though he now walked with a slight limp, Matt's presence was steady, like an old oak that had weathered more than its share of storms. His face, rugged and creased, bore the softened gaze of a man who'd chosen healing over bitterness. He lived now with his 10-year-old daughter, Hannah, and their dog, Buddy, a golden retriever with a crooked ear and a coat like late summer wheat. Buddy had been rescued 2 years earlier, pulled from a flooded farm during a storm in Tennessee, and since then had rarely left Hannah's side. Hannah was small for her age, with a crown of curly brown hair and round glasses that always slid down her nose. She was a gentle, observant child, curious without being loud, who read mystery novels under her blanket and whispered secrets to Buddy as if he could answer. After her mother passed from cancer when Hannah was 6, something quiet settled inside her, a grief she rarely spoke of, but which gave her an old soul stillness that even Matt sometimes couldn't reach. That night, Matt had kissed her forehead and told her to dream of horses. Buddy curled beside her, paws twitching in sleep. The house hummed with the warmth of a space heater and the creaks of old wood settling. Then the sirens began. At first, Matt thought it was a dream, the kind that echoed back from years of emergency calls and radios hissing through smoke. But the shrill whine rose higher, and then the ground trembled. He was on his feet before his body fully understood what was happening. Outside, the night was no longer still. The horizon beyond Liberty Falls glowed faintly orange, like the edge of a flame licking at paper. Somewhere, something had already been hit. "Get up." Matt's voice cracked as he threw open Hannah's door. She blinked sleepily, confused. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "Grab your coat. We need to go. Now." Downstairs, Buddy whined at the back door, ears flattened, tail stiff. Dogs knew. As Matt hauled the emergency pack from the closet, bottled water, flashlights, Hannah's inhaler, an emergency broadcast began on the radio. A voice, flat and hurried. Unidentified aerial strike confirmed over northeastern Ohio. Civilians are advised to evacuate into underground shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Matt's heart pounded. Liberty Falls didn't have bomb shelters. Their closest refuge was the old civil defense tunnel beneath the community center, 2 blocks away. Hannah, leash Buddy, were heading to the tunnel. They didn't make it to the sidewalk. The sky cracked open above them like a wrathful god. A thunderous boom swallowed the night. Windows shattered. Alarms howled. The blast wave threw Matt back against the porch railing. Buddy tore loose from Hannah's grip and bolted, eyes wild with terror. "Buddy!" Hannah screamed, reaching, stumbling. Matt grabbed her arm just as debris began to rain down. Roof tiles, glass, pieces of someone's mailbox. Buddy disappeared into the swirling dust and smoke, a flash of gold vanishing into chaos. "Hannah, no!" Matt held her as she fought to run after him, but the air had become a wall of sound and shrapnel. A second explosion bloomed to the east, lighting the horizon red. He made a split-second decision, No time, no safety. We run. Now, dragging Hannah behind him, Matt sprinted toward the community center. Sirens screamed from every direction. The once picturesque town square was now a war zone. Flames licked up from what used to be Jenkins' bookstore. Cars lay overturned. Somewhere a dog was barking, frantic. Matt pushed through a half-collapsed fence as the civil defense tunnel came into view, a concrete maw at the edge of the ball field. Several families had already gathered, some bleeding, others just weeping. An older woman held a broken violin. A boy in pajamas clutched a photo frame. As they stumbled down the steps into the tunnel's cold embrace, Hannah collapsed into Matt's arms. "Buddy's still out there," she whispered, shaking. "I know," he said softly, though his voice cracked. "We'll find him." But in that moment, as another shockwave rattled the tunnel walls, even Matt didn't know if that was a promise he could keep. Outside, above the smoke and ruin, the stars remained, cold and unmoved. Somewhere in the rubble of Liberty Falls, a dog's heartbeat still echoed, unheard by all, except one. Morning crept into Liberty Falls like a mourner at a wake, soft-footed, solemn, gray. Snow still lingered in patches on the blackened earth, but now it was smeared with soot and ash. The white turned to ash-gray. Fires from the night before hissed weakly in the distance, and the sky was the color of bruised steel. The air carried the faint tang of burning insulation and scorched pine. Matt Harper stood at the edge of what used to be Main Street. His once proud town was now a battlefield of twisted girders, caved-in storefronts, and glass-crusted sidewalks. The old clock tower at the center of town had collapsed into a heap of stone teeth and iron bones. With a hard breath, Matt adjusted the faded yellow helmet on his head. His limp had returned in full that morning, stabbing through his thigh like a bitter reminder that he wasn't the man he used to be. But there was no time for pain. Not today. His jacket was marked with soot and his face was drawn tight with fatigue, but his voice remained steady as he gave orders to the volunteer rescue team beside him. Young men and women in borrowed gear, pale-faced and wide-eyed. Most had never seen anything like this. Matt didn't blame them. He never imagined he'd see something like this again either. A man named Luis Morales, the town's utility technician, stood nearby, scanning a debris map and coordinating with engineers. Luis was in his early 50s, stocky, always wore a navy jumpsuit, and had a pencil tucked permanently behind his ear. Known for his dry humor and calm in chaos, Luis had once saved half the town's grid during a blizzard blackout. Now he seemed older, slower, his hands trembling slightly as he pointed out structurally compromised zones. Matt glanced toward the southern lot, where the remains of the town library lay like a forgotten corpse. The ornate white columns were cracked in two, pages of burned books fluttering like black butterflies in the wind. That was where Hannah had said she'd heard Buddy. Hannah stood beside the truck, arms crossed, jaw clenched in quiet rebellion. She hadn't spoken much since dawn. Her hair was tied in a messy braid, glasses slightly crooked, her boots too big for her feet. Matt had told her to stay inside the shelter, but she refused. "I heard him, Dad," she repeated for the third time. He barked. Twice. Matt rubbed his temple. "Hannah, I want to believe you." But the scanners didn't pick up anything under that building. "There's nothing." "There is," she said, her voice low but fierce. "You just don't want to listen." A new voice interrupted. "You hear the dog too, sweetheart." They both turned. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, approached with a press badge slung around her neck. She wore a green military-style jacket too thin for the cold, scuffed jeans, and a notepad already half full of frantic handwriting. Her name was Rachel Hayes. Rachel had only recently moved to Liberty Falls to escape the burnout of big city reporting. Ambitious but disillusioned, she had chased scandal and politics in Chicago before a betrayal by a former editor cost her both a story and a friend. Now she wrote human interest pieces for the Liberty Ledger and nursed her career back to life from the roots. Her brown hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her eyes were sharp, constantly scanning, absorbing details like a sponge. She crouched to Hannah's level. "Tell me exactly what you heard. Don't leave anything out." Matt stepped forward. "I'm sorry, but this isn't the time." "It's okay," Hannah said, never breaking eye contact with Rachel. It was just before sunrise. I heard a bark coming from under the library. Not loud, but sharp, like when Buddy wants to go outside. Then another one, quieter. Rachel scribbled. Anyone else hear it? No, Hannah said. No one listened. Rachel turned to Matt. You think it's possible? Matt hesitated. The structure is unstable. We've run the thermal and audio scans. Nothing came up. Rachel tilted her head. But those machines aren't perfect, are they? Especially with insulation, thick concrete. They're the best we've got. He cut in, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Behind them, the rescue team loaded stretchers into a van. Someone was still crying near the elementary school, their voice echoing like a ghost through empty streets. Rachel stood. Would you mind if I took a closer look? Just for the story. Matt sighed. If you get hurt, I'm the one explaining it to your editor. She smiled, then made her way toward the debris field. Hannah followed. Rachel crouched near the edge of the rubble and placed her hand against the broken concrete. Closed her eyes. Waited. Nothing. Then a whisper. A scrape. Her eyes opened. That was something. Matt watched from a distance, arms folded, jaw locked tight. Hannah glanced back at him. Rachel turned toward her. You said Buddy is your dog? Hannah nodded. We rescued him from a flood. He's afraid of loud noises. He probably ran when the first bomb hit. Rachel scribbled. Has he ever gone missing before? No, never. Rachel's voice softened. You think he'd stay under there this long if he could have gotten out? I think he's waiting for me. Rachel didn't answer. Instead, she tucked her notebook into her jacket and took a final glance at the wreckage. Later that afternoon, while Matt joined the crew clearing the remains of a daycare, Rachel snuck back to the library ruins alone. This time, she brought a small handheld voice recorder, an old habit from her Chicago days. She pressed record and placed it carefully near a crack in the stone. Then she waited. It was nearly 10 minutes before she heard it, faint like a gasp through gravel. Not a bark, not even a whine, but movement, scraping, a breath. She played it back twice to be sure. Her heart thumped. The night air in Liberty Falls had grown colder, sharper, as if the town itself recoiled from the wounds still seeping beneath its skin. The fires had stopped, but the ash remained, a fine, gray film that coated every window pane, every branch, every memory. A waxing moon hung overhead, pale and distant, casting its light like a faded photograph over the silent ruins of the library. Matt Harper stood inside the temporary operations tent beside Liberty Falls High School gymnasium, his shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed with red. Every hour brought a new name to the casualty list. He hadn't slept in nearly 36 hours. His uniform smelled of melted plastic and smoke. His back ached from crouching over too many collapsed walls, too many lifeless hands reaching from rubble. Across the gymnasium, Hannah sat curled on a cot, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She didn't cry. Not anymore. The other kids talked. Some even laughed when the generators hummed to life and warm soup was passed around. But Hannah stayed quiet, her eyes always turned toward the darkened windows. Buddy was still out there. She was sure of it. Every night since the airstrike, she heard again the bark, or something like it. At first, she thought it was a dream, but the sound came with a certainty, like the way she used to hear Buddy pacing outside her door during storms. Only now it came faint and broken, muffled under rubble and time. Matt had dismissed it gently at first. Sometimes, he said, when something terrible happens, our minds play tricks. We want to hear what we miss most. But Hannah wasn't imagining it. Neither was Rachel Hayes. The young journalist had returned to the site of the library each night, her digital recorder tucked in her coat, boots crunching over broken stone. Her apartment had no power, so she worked by lantern light, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped thermos and playing the audio again and again. The sound she captured, brief, gritty, faint, was not conclusive, but it wasn't nothing. There was something alive in it, something desperate. She'd sent it to her editor in Columbus, a man named Joel Barnes, gruff, chain-smoking, and notoriously skeptical. Joel had mentored Rachel when she was fresh out of Northwestern, but their relationship had frayed after a failed political piece exposed one of his biggest advertisers. Now, over a staticky call, he scoffed. It sounds like wind, Rachel. Or rebar shifting. We're not publishing fairy tales. It's not wind, she argued. There's cadence. Rhythm. It's a bark. Even if it is, what's the story? Local girl hears her dog. You're better than this. I think there's more beneath that building than just a dog, she said. Something's off about the collapse, and no one's asking why. Joel paused. Don't chase ghosts, Rachel. Not again. The line went dead. Rachel threw her phone across the cot. It landed in a pile of papers, sketches of the library floor plan, notes on its renovations, a half-written article titled The Voice beneath the stone. She ran her fingers through her hair. She needed someone who believed. Someone like Hannah. That night, after curfew, Rachel found Hannah near the back exit of the gym, wearing Matt's old firefighter coat like armor. Her glasses reflected the yellow emergency lights, and she clutched a walkie-talkie in one hand. Are you sneaking out too? Hannah asked flatly. I prefer investigating, Rachel replied. They walked through the darkness together, weaving between debris piles and overturned light poles. The moon guided them more than the weak flashlights they carried. Rachel had always felt oddly calm in ruined places. Maybe it was because destruction didn't lie. It showed the truth of what once stood, what had fallen. She looked at Hannah and saw that same steadiness, but younger, more fragile, like a pane of glass braced against a storm. At the edge of the library ruins, Hannah knelt and placed her ear to the cracked foundation. I always hear him around now, she whispered. It's quieter than barking, more like breath. Rachel clicked on her recorder and laid it beside her. They sat in silence. 5 minutes. 10. A breeze lifted the ash in a lazy swirls. Then, just as Rachel considered turning off the recorder, it came. A faint sound, like a paw scratching stone. Then a huff. A whine. Gone in seconds. They stared at each other. You heard that? Hannah whispered. I did, Rachel said. And I'm not waiting for Joel to believe it. We're going to prove it. The snow had melted into muddy veins that streaked across Liberty Falls like scars, soaking into the cracked pavement and bleeding into the foundations of ruined homes. Morning didn't rise so much as seep into the town, gray and reluctant. Smoke still rose in slow spirals from places where the earth itself seemed to exhale loss. It was under this pale, broken sky that Matt Harper stood at the perimeter of the old library ruins, fists clenched at his sides, watching his daughter crawl through the wreckage with a stranger in tow. Rachel was there too, her green jacket dusted in soot, her dark hair pulled back tight as she moved with a practiced determination that surprised him. They were both crouched near a fractured support beam, whispering to each other. Matt's boots crunched over debris as he marched toward them, his voice low but cutting. What the hell do you think you're doing? Hannah jerked upright, eyes wide behind her fogged-up glasses. Dad, do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Matt snapped. This structure isn't stable. You could have been buried alive. Rachel rose calmly, brushing ash off her jeans. We were careful, and we had to confirm something. I don't care what you had to confirm, he said, turning to Hannah. You're not to come back here. Ever. But I heard him again, Hannah whispered, trembling, and Rachel recorded it. Let him hear it, please. Rachel hesitated, then pulled her phone from her coat pocket and played the recording. It was faint, garbled, metal shifting, stone cracking, but then clear and distinct. A high-pitched whine, like a dog trapped in a tunnel. Matt's expression didn't change immediately. He stood there listening. Then he asked quietly, When was this? 3 hours ago, Rachel replied. Same spot. Same sound. He's down there, Matt. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked at the ruins with a different kind of heaviness in his gaze. Not frustration, but guilt. Go back to the shelter, he finally said to Hannah, softer now. I'll take it from here. By that afternoon, Matt had returned to the site, alone. Not in full uniform, but wearing his old turnout gear, patched at the elbows and knees. He brought with him a harness, flashlight, and radio he'd quietly borrowed from the emergency depot. No one had authorized the search. He knew he could lose his role on the team if word got out. But he also knew he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he didn't try. The entrance he chose was a half-collapsed stairwell at the back of the library, once a staff-only access to the archive level. He remembered it vaguely from the fire safety inspection he'd done years ago. The ceiling was cracked like a dry riverbed, but stable enough for a short descent. His boots sank into soot and ash as he moved forward, flashlights slicing through the dusty dark. Below, it smelled of wet paper, mold, and scorched plastic. Shelves had fallen like dominoes. Broken filing cabinets jutted from the floor at crooked angles. Somewhere behind it all, the whimpering had started again. "Buddy," he called. His voice bounced off concrete, dull and muffled. Then a sharp bark. Matt froze. It was real. He followed the sound, stepping over beams and cracked tile until he reached the back corner, where a supply closet had collapsed inward. Through the gap in the wall, he saw movement, just a flicker, but it was enough. Buddy was alive. The dog was pinned beneath part of the shelving, legs trembling, ears twitching. His golden fur was darkened with soot, and his eyes looked up with exhausted trust. "Hang in there, boy," Matt whispered, voice breaking. He used a crowbar to wedge the metal aside, inch by inch. It took 20 minutes to make a hole large enough, and by the end, Matt was shaking from exertion and emotion. As soon as there was space, Buddy crawled out, whimpering softly, then collapsed against Matt's chest. "I've got you," Matt whispered, wrapping his arms around the trembling dog. "You're okay now." He radioed Luis Morales. Meanwhile, Rachel wasn't done. The audio recordings had sparked something else in her, a hunch. She started cross-referencing the timestamps of each bark with the reported blast zones. She spent hours at the makeshift town hall, poring over printed satellite images and coordinates provided by federal cleanup teams. That's when she found the pattern. The library wasn't even on the list of priority targets. And yet, its destruction was surgically precise. She brought her findings to an old friend from journalism school, Mara Lynn, a cybersecurity analyst who now worked with civilian oversight groups. Mara, tall, lean, with blunt bangs and an obsession for tea and government secrets, reviewed Rachel's data through a secure channel. This wasn't a random strike, Mara confirmed. The precision suggests a guided payload. Not from the rogue attack narrative they're feeding you. Rachel stared at the blinking cursor on her screen. "You're saying someone wanted that library hit?" "There's more," Mara added. "Someone wiped the building's zoning permits 3 days before the attack. All online traces gone. But that basement wasn't just books. There's chatter about old military records being stored there, records the public wasn't supposed to know existed." Rachel sat back, cold settling in her chest. The town thought it had been collateral damage, but it had been targeted. By the time Matt returned with Buddy in his arms, the sun was dipping low, painting the ruins in tired gold. Hannah ran across the parking lot when she saw them. She fell to her knees beside them, hugging Buddy with shaking hands, tears blurring her glasses. "You found him," she whispered. Matt looked at Rachel, who had just returned from the town hall, her expression grave. "So did you," he replied quietly. The evening wind carried a silence that wasn't peace. It was the breath held between knowing and acting. Liberty Falls had begun to stir with murmurs, the way a forest rustles before storm. People noticed the shift in Matt's demeanor, the way Rachel now moved with a pen in one hand and purpose in the other. Buddy, wrapped in bandages and exhaustion, lay in the corner of the makeshift shelter like a silent guardian, his amber eyes still alert despite the trauma buried behind them. Matt hadn't told the others what he saw beneath the library. Not yet. But the image was burned into his mind. The barely visible steel door behind where Buddy had been pinned, half concealed under rubble and charred floorboards. A government-grade security lock down in a town library. That alone had raised alarms. He couldn't sleep. Neither could Rachel. They met again just before dawn, just as the frost returned to the streets in thin, glittering veins. Matt carried his old firelight lantern, and Rachel had her backpack slung over one shoulder, recorder and spare batteries already packed. "You sure about this?" Matt asked, glancing toward the half-collapsed library. "We don't know what's behind that door." Rachel pulled on her gloves. "What we found the other day was just the beginning." I contacted Mara again. She found records of a federal lease on the property dated back to 1979, years before the library was built. The The zoning plans were altered twice in the last decade. Whatever's in that room wasn't meant to be found. They crossed into the rubble cautiously. The town's emergency perimeter had shrunk since the worst of the crisis passed, and the library was now in what they called the gray zone. Not condemned, but considered unsafe. Rachel had mapped the path from memory, and Matt found the hidden stairwell again, now braced with temporary support beams. The cold below was thicker than the air above, as though even temperature feared what was kept inside. As they reached the bottom, Buddy's faint scratching from the other day echoed in Matt's ears, though the dog was safe now. What had he been trying to warn them about? The door loomed again, thick metal, scratched but intact. Rachel ran her hand over the keypad. "No power," she murmured. "No getting in that way." Matt studied the frame, knelt, and found the lock's mechanical override covered by melted plastic. He pulled a flathead screwdriver from his belt and began to work, teeth clenched. It took 10 minutes and 2 bleeding knuckles, but the bolt finally gave with a clunk that echoed through the corridor like a warning shot. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was dry, pressurized, stale. Lights flickered overhead, surprisingly functional thanks to a backup battery pack blinking in the corner. The room was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, but the walls were lined with heavy filing cabinets, each drawer stamped with a military emblem and numbered code. Rachel's eyes widened. This is a federal archive. She moved quickly, photographing as much as possible with her phone. One folder stood out, already half open on the table. Inside, satellite imagery, redacted communications, and a black and white map with Liberty Falls circled in red ink. The words Project Silo, compartmentalized access only, were scrawled on top. "Matt," she whispered. This wasn't a mistake. Liberty Falls wasn't collateral. It was targeted. Before Matt could respond, a low click sounded from behind them. They turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a matte black coat with no insignia. His stance was calm, but calculated, like someone used to commanding rooms without raising his voice. His name, as they'd learn later, was Agent Conrad Pike. "Step away from the documents," he said. His voice was smooth but had an undertone of steel. Matt instinctively stepped in front of Rachel. "We didn't break anything. Do you want to know why a library had a bomb shelter full of classified files?" Conrad didn't smile. "You weren't cleared to enter this area. These documents are property of the United States government. Hand over your phone, Ms. Hayes." Rachel swallowed hard but didn't move. People died in this town. They deserved to know why. Behind Conrad, 2 more agents appeared, both younger, both silent. One, a woman in a gray turtleneck with sharp eyes and a headset, glanced briefly into the room, then nodded toward Conrad. "They've already copied part of it," she said flatly. Conrad's jaw tensed. "You leave here, and you never speak of this again. You were never in this room. You'll say it was unstable. No one will question that. If you do speak, will you bomb us too?" Rachel cut in. That was the moment Matt stepped forward. "If you touch her, you'll answer to me." Conrad regarded him for a long moment, as if deciding whether Matt was bluffing. Then he stepped back. "You have 30 seconds to leave. And remember, you owe your lives to my mercy." Outside, the sky was turning gold. The agents disappeared as quickly as they came, swallowed by the mist beyond the ruins. Rachel and Matt walked in silence until they reached the edge of the perimeter. Only then did Rachel stop, heart racing. "I recorded the whole thing," she said, lifting her necklace. It was a discreet mic, a backup she'd worn ever since Chicago. Matt stared. "You're insane." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I'm right." The stars returned to Liberty Falls on a night so clear it seemed unreal, too clean, too quiet after the weeks of sirens, soot, and sorrow. The sky had peeled back its clouds as if making way for something honest. The air carried the scent of pine and cold metal, remnants of destruction and renewal dancing together in the same breath. Beneath that still sky, Matt Harper stood at the edge of the high school parking lot, the dog Buddy pressed close to his leg, and a decision so heavy on his shoulders he could feel it in his spine. In his hand was a weathered USB drive, Rachel's final copy of the files from the hidden room below the library. Project Silo, encrypted and damning, was now compressed into a single, fragile stick of plastic. The federal agents had been relentless over the last 24 hours. Quiet threats, anonymous messages, unmarked vans parked too long at corners. But this drive could end it, could stop another Liberty Falls from ever happening again. The problem was they'd come for it, and they knew Matt had it. He looked down at Buddy. The retriever's bandaged paw trembled slightly in the cold, but his eyes held steady, quiet loyalty burning behind the haze of exhaustion. A week ago, Matt would have said he didn't believe in miracles. But Buddy had survived everything. Collapsed stone, thirst, fear, just to be found, just to warn them. Behind him, the gymnasium lights flickered. Inside, Rachel sat beside Hannah on a bench near the water jugs. Hannah was brushing Buddy's fur with a plastic comb, her mouth tight with focus. Rachel, meanwhile, was finishing the draft of the story on her laptop, the final piece before uploading it to Mara and the encrypted server they'd arranged. "We need time," Rachel had said hours ago. "Just a few more hours to get the full article live. Once it's public, they can't stop it." But time, Matt feared, was already slipping away. That fear proved right when the van pulled up just past midnight. It was Matt Gray, no license plates, no logos. A man stepped out, Conrad Pike. His coat was zipped to his throat, and his face was calm, unreadable. The moonlight gave his eyes a silver sheen. "You have something that belongs to us," he said. Matt didn't answer. Not right away. Conrad took a step forward. "You can hand it over now, or we take it. There won't be another offer." Matt's jaw flexed. "You already tried that. Didn't work." Behind Conrad, two more agents stepped out of the van. One of them held a duffel bag. The other, tall, blonde, younger, was clearly nervous. His fingers twitched on the strap of his radio. Matt shifted his stance. "You'll have to go through me." "That can be arranged," Conrad said, and lifted a small device from his pocket. But before anyone could move, Luis Morales appeared from behind the corner of the gym. The utility worker was still in his jumpsuit, carrying nothing but a flashlight and a walkie-talkie. Beside him stood Officer Danielle Rucker, a tall black woman with short hair and a stern expression who had returned from maternity leave early to help rebuild her community. Her hand rested firmly on the grip of her sidearm. "You're trespassing on emergency shelter property," Danielle said evenly. "I need you to step away." Conrad's smile was thin. "Do you have any idea who?" "We do," Luis cut in. "And we've called in every civilian volunteer and off-duty officer we have." Around them, headlights began to flick on. Cars parked along the street flared to life. From the gym's entrance, men and women, rescue workers, former soldiers, firefighters, stepped out into the night. Matt didn't have to say a word. He simply stepped forward, pressed the USB into Rachel's palm, and whispered, "Run." She did. Rachel dashed across the school field, feet slapping against damp grass, the cold slicing her lungs. One agent gave chase, but was intercepted by two town volunteers who tackled him with quiet, fierce determination. Rachel reached the back of the gym, where Mara's mobile relay was already blinking blue in her car's dashboard. She slammed the drive into the port. The upload began. Percent. Outside, the agents quickly realized they were outnumbered. Conrad didn't fight it. He simply stepped back into the van and gave Matt a look, not of defeat but of delay. "We'll see you again," he said. "I'll be ready," Matt replied. They drove off. 15 minutes later, the article went live. 2 days later, the Liberty Truth exploded online. Rachel's name was printed on digital front pages across the country. The article revealed Project Silo's covert relocation of decommissioned weapons data to small-town libraries repurposed as clandestine archives. The library in Liberty Falls had been misidentified as a viable hostile site in a flawed algorithm used by an autonomous strike system, an error the agency had tried to bury under fire and ash. The footage, the files, and the recording of Conrad's threats spread faster than any silencing effort could move. A Senate inquiry was launched. Whistleblowers came forward. But in Liberty Falls, the aftermath was quieter, more intimate. A week after the article broke, the town gathered beneath string lights outside the high school. Buddy lay at the front of the crowd, still healing, a handmade medal hanging from his collar that read, "Local Hero." Matt stood beside Hannah as the mayor. A short, red-faced woman named Evelyn Boyd handed the girl a plaque. Evelyn had been mayor for almost a decade, known for her practical, no-nonsense approach to town governance. She wore a tan coat 2 sizes too big and rarely smiled, but tonight her eyes welled up. "You reminded us what courage looks like," Evelyn said, "and what it means to listen when no one else does." The crowd clapped. Hannah blushed, but held Buddy's paw in her hand. Matt looked at his daughter and felt something shift inside him, something old and stubborn breaking away. He'd spent years protecting her from a world he didn't trust. But now he saw the strength in her, not despite the fear, because of it. When the ceremony ended, Matt bent down beside Buddy and whispered, "You saved more than just us, didn't you?" Buddy licked his hand, tired but content. Above them, the stars shimmered like watchful eyes, bearing witness to a town that had almost been forgotten, but had refused to stay silent. The lesson from Liberty Falls is simple but powerful. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the deepest truths. A girl's belief, a dog's loyalty, and a community's courage reminded us that listening, truly listening, can change everything. In our own lives, we often overlook the whispers amid the noise. But maybe what we need isn't louder answers, just quieter hearts. If this story touched your soul the way it touched ours, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope can survive even under rubble. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, or simply type "Amen" if you believe in the power of faith, love, and second chances. Subscribe for more stories that stir the heart, and may God bless each of you watching tonight.